Welcome to our section on theater. Let's get started. When we're talking about theater, we're discussing drama. What is a drama? Okay, let's start with our text definition. Drama is a collaborative art, meaning there's a lot of different aspects that need to come together and work together, that represent events and situations through the actions of actors in a play, on a stage, in front of a live audience. Okay, you can find that definition on page 197 of your text. So what's interesting about drama is there's so many different aspects that need to come together to make it. So we've got actors on a stage, so we've got the acting element. We've got music, which is accompanying the plot or moving the action along. Okay, we've got set design, and then we also have costume design. So we kind of have these four different elements that are working together, that are all needed to play a part, no pun intended, to play a part in making a drama successful. Okay, so drama is unique, and as is dance, because when we're talking about medium, which we talked about medium for all the different other aspects of the humanities, but here, the human body is needed to create this art form. So the medium is the human body. Now, we've talked about participation as well in some of these other aspects. So what does participation feel like as we watch a drama? Well, if you've ever been to a play, you might realize, you sit down, you find your seat, the play begins, and you're still sort of thinking about other things maybe, or something else might cross your mind. But hopefully the longer we sit there and the longer we watch a drama, the more and more engaged we become in the story at hand. Until, like your text says, the distance diminishes between us and the actors. So that distance begins to diminish, and we start to feel like we are part of this world that's being created. Let's talk about the elements of a drama. Your text describes these 6 areas: plot, character, diction, thought, spectacle, and music. And now these actually were proposed by Aristotle, who's considered to be the greatest drama critic, who, of course, was an ancient Greek himself, and theater really began in ancient Greece. So he had a lot of material that he was able to analyze to come up with these ideas. Okay, you might notice a few similarities to literature as well. There's some overlap. And in fact, our literature course, if you haven't taken it yet, or maybe you have, but we read a drama called A Raisin in the Sun in our Intro to Lit class. And so if you take that with me in the fall, we will be reading that together. But anyway, you can kind of think of written drama as a kind of literature. But the question I want you to think about as we're thinking about the differences between literature and theater is what is missed by reading a drama versus seeing it? Are there things that we gain by seeing it versus reading it? Or vice versa? Are there things that we gain by reading it that we don't see by seeing it? So, things to think about. Okay, so let's take these one by one. First, let's look at plot. Okay, the plot, just like literature, is a series of events. It's what happens in the drama. For Aristotle, who, of course, is looking at mainly tragedies, this usually leads to a disaster that brings about enlightenment of some kind. Okay, that's the definition of tragedy, or a tragic plot. Okay, now the different aspects of a plot are very similar to those of literature. We have a rising action. We have a climax, or also known as a recognition, and then a falling action and denouement. So let's take a look at those real quick. We'll come back to this slide. So we can see that here. We kind of have the exposition, which I like to think of as kind of like an introduction, or we're kind of getting that introductory information that we need to know. What is a character's name? How are these people related? What time period are we in? That kind of thing. We're getting that basic information. And then the rising action is kind of a snowball effect of tension. So rising action is introducing conflict, it's introducing tension into the story, and the climax is the height of that tension or the height of that problem. There's usually some sort of issue, conflict there. And so really that is like the height of tension or conflict in the story. And after that event happens, we move into falling action, where we sort of see how that climax or that important moment, that pinnacle moment, how that works itself out, what kind of effect it has on the characters. And then we move into denouement, which is sort of kind of like mirrors the exposition, where this is sort of like your outro, if you will, kind of just the last sort of few things that happen that kind of wrap up the story for us. Okay. We also can think of the climax as a moment of truth, is what your text calls it. And that is also called recognition, like I said. So let's move back here so you can kind of see where those elements land. And the reversal in tragic drama is when the protagonist's fortune turns from good to bad. So that is a hallmark that always happens in a tragic play, the reversal. So you can think of, their fortunes are reversed in a way, to help you remember that term. Okay, character. Hopefully we all know what a character is. It's a person whose actions and motivations are revealed to the audience in some way. Okay, there's 3 terms I'd like for you to know. The first is hamartia. This is a fatal flaw in a character which leads to a tragic end. And the next term is hubris. Now, these are very close in terms, close terms, very close in definition. But hubris is exclusively is more pride, okay, leading to a downfall. So both of them lead to a tragic end, but hamartia can mean one thing, or hubris can mean another. It means pride specifically, okay? Catharsis is the last element that I want us to look at. And catharsis has to do with the feeling that's produced in us, the viewer, by tragedy. Okay, so if you've ever watched, let's say, a movie that's about someone who has cancer, okay, we watch this, our heart is melting, it's being torn in two. We feel like we're experiencing that with that person. It's almost like we are walking in their footsteps. And then when the movie is over or the play is over, we almost feel this sense of like a deep breath. I can take a deep breath. It's like a purging or a cleansing that we experience by experiencing that with the character. Sort of, we're not experiencing that personally, but we feel like we did, and so we sort of have this release or feeling. So we call that catharsis, okay? So these are just a couple terms to know in terms of character. Okay, next is diction. This is the language of the drama. And it must be appropriate to the action. But what's interesting is diction can tell us quite a lot, okay? So there's obviously quite a bit of difference between saying, "Hey, y'all," and "Greetings, gentlemen." Okay, we're both mean the same thing, essentially, but they're said in very different ways. So diction is really the way we speak, or the way the words are put together in a play. Diction can give us information about time period. It can give us information about culture or geographical location or socioeconomic status. So if we're listening closely to diction, we can learn quite a lot if we're only paying attention. Okay, next, spectacle. These are the visual elements in a play, okay? So this can include costume, set design, or stage. So this is spectacle. Music. Okay. Now, in Greek drama, the dialogue was often sung or chanted by a chorus. So music was a really intrinsic part of Greek drama. But there are many plays where there is no music incorporated. It's not often used in more serious modern plays. But when we're talking about musical theater, it's obviously a huge component. So think about Rent, think about Cats, or Phantom of the Opera, or Hamilton, or Les Miserables, or any of those big musical theater numbers. And so obviously music is of a huge importance in those. So we're going to consider that aspect. And then thought. So we want to think about dialogue and soliloquy, okay? Thought, the ideas that underlie the plot, which are expressed by dialogue and soliloquy. So, since there's nothing really written to tell us what values or ideas are in a drama, because obviously there's no narrator usually, that means we have to pay special attention to what the characters are saying. This is the way that we gain content from theater, okay? When we're thinking about content, how do we gain content? Well, we do that by listening to what the characters are saying. We can do that by listening to dialogue and soliloquy. Dialogue is an exchange of, well, I shouldn't have used the same word there, it's probably confusing, but dialogue is an exchange of words or exchange of conversation between characters. Okay, I'm going to change that right now. Let's do that. Conversation. Okay, and it helps move the action along. Soliloquy, on the other hand, is spoken by an actor to himself or herself. Okay, this is what we might call an aside. It's sort of this person, it's almost like everything around them freezes and they sort of step forward into the light and they give this sort of monologue. Okay, now this is designed to give insight into the character that's speaking the lines. This is our chance to really kind of get inside their head. And we can also often think about this as really a moment of truth-telling. Often in dialogue, we don't always know, the character could be lying to the other character, there might be untruths happening. But typically when we're getting a soliloquy or an aside, this is this pure moment of truth-telling because there's no other characters around. And so they can feel like they can really unburden themselves to the people around them, okay? So we get to be the people listening. And if you can hear my child yelling in the back, I apologize. I'm just going to keep going. Okay, so archetypal patterns. What is an archetypal pattern? What is an archetype? Well, it is a psychological pattern that people will easily recognize and relate to, okay? So there can be lots of different archetypes. So there's lots of different archetypes. We have archetypal plots. An archetypal plot is, for an example, we could think about having to sacrifice something or someone for the good of greater society. That's a very common archetypal pattern that we see. The quest, right? We talked about the quest in literature. This idea that we have to go off and achieve something or accomplish something, go off on a journey, for example. We could think about Hamlet, for example. He's seeking the truth about his father's death. We could think about Lord of the Rings. He's on a quest to destroy the ring, right? Whoops. The quest for self-identity, okay, and the importance of being earnest. So there's lots of different types of quests, but that's a very common one. Another could be rags to riches. We could think about the archetypal plot of like having to slay a monster or overcoming an evil person, a villain, that kind of thing. So archetypal plots, and usually these are patterns that are common to people for thousands of years. So these are like, this is nothing new, folks, okay? So when you go and you read, or not read, when you see, let's say, a movie about a superhero, or you watch a play about a quest, these are archetypal patterns that have lasted for thousands of years, okay? Nothing new. And so they're usually patterns that we see reoccurring in different narratives. And often we can feel their importance even if we don't recognize them consciously, your text says. So we might not say to ourselves, this is a quest. But we are so familiar with this storyline that it's often comforting to us and we enjoy it because we kind of know, maybe not know exactly what happens, but we kind of get an idea or a sense of where the plot is headed, okay? So again, I named a couple of different types of plots, archetypal plots. They can also be characters. So if you think about the hero or the femme fatale, the damsel in distress, the girl next door, the funny scientist, the mad scientist, the funny sidekick or the mad scientist. So these are all different examples of archetypal characters. So you get the idea. All right, let's move on. The genres of drama. Okay, we have a few. first we have tragedy, okay? So within tragedy, we've got noble protagonists. Okay, these are essential for good tragedies. According to Aristotle, that is, okay? So we have to have a noble protagonist in order to have a good tragedy, okay? So someone that we can root for, okay? An ordinary protagonist. The plot is more the center of interest than the characters for this one, okay? So this protagonist maybe, he serves a purpose, but he is not as important really as the plot, as the story, okay? Now, modern drama shies away from traditional tragic structures because things have really changed. We don't see morality or sin or guilt or death maybe necessarily the same as we did hundreds of years ago or thousands of years ago. When I say we, of course, I'm not really meaning Christians, but the world in general sees those things differently. So often there isn't a noble protagonist because in the world's eyes, there's really no one noble enough to earn our empathy. And not everyone believes in this strong idea of fate. Obviously, as Christians, we believe that God has plans for us and has preordained things for us. But when we're talking about someone who maybe doesn't hold those values, they may not believe that everything is tied to this idea of fate, that things are fated. Okay. Okay. I've got a child